Welcome to Alignment First, where we're on a mission to bring leaders back to their peace, presence, and power. And I'm joined by Chris Hynes, the co-founder and chief technology officer at OwnerRez and fellow Toastmaster. Dude, thanks so much for taking the time, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I've got to learn so much about how OwnerRez came to be and who you are as a leader through Toastmasters. But I want to go back to how you and I met over cigars through our mutual friend, Will Hurst. Shout out to Will and Big Little Jim's. It started out just as a couple of bros getting together for a smoke, and the conversations get so deep, so quick, and for all the problems that we solve in our respective businesses, as far as scale and juggling family and all those good things. Let's start there. How big is that circle for you that supports everything that you're building on a personal and professional level?
The circle, I think you realize it's bigger than you think it is a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
You have your inner circle, and that's people that you're really connected to. But if you're running your life right, if you're reaching out to other people, then there's other people who come into your life just kind of randomly, and you form connections with them, and you get a little helping hand in places that you wouldn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something in terms of our Toastmaster journey. It's very interesting how that happened. You know, I've been interested in Toastmasters for a while and did speaking and speech and debate back when I was in high school, wanted to bring out some of those things. As I got more, as the company grew and I wanted to become more in charge and more able to communicate my vision to people. And so that actually transpired through that first meeting, I think, with Will, right? That was one of the things that we just kind of talked about. I forget how it was you mentioned, or I offhanded a message, and you said, hey, I'm part of this really great Toastmasters group, and came in there not even expecting anything, and have been there for a couple of years and learning a whole lot.
Yeah, dude, we've been doing this thing for a couple of years now, man. It's gone by so fast. For somebody who has been in tech since they were a teenager, and what would otherwise be categorized as a very introvert specialization, what has Toastmasters brought to you in terms of enhancing your skill set in business leadership?
Reps. I think that's the big first thing, is a chance to get reps in front of a friendly crowd that gives you just a little bit of feedback each time. You can't take in a whole lot. And I've tried to do that before, right? I've tried to, I got to do all these things and I got to stack all these things in. It never works. You really have to focus on a couple of different things. And as you know, with Toastmasters, your first speech is just be able to stand up and not have your heart's beating, you're getting a little cold sweats, and then the words are coming out. You're not really knowing exactly what you're saying, but that's that first one. And then you start getting to higher levels where you're working on your emotions, you're working on your command of the room, you're working on your vocal variety and different things. And seeing other people do it, and then being able to replicate that yourself and just work little by little by little, that's what you really get there.
It's wild. Kevin Trudeau calls it spaced repetition in his book, Your Wish is Your Command. And I really feel like Toastmasters is the embodiment of that practice, because you see so many people that claim to want that big stage, those massive opportunities, and at the same time they're not practiced. And then all of a sudden that opportunity does show up because they're a subject matter expert in their field, or something pops on social media, but they don't have the reps behind them to really show up fully expressed in that opportunity, and it falls flat or passes them by. Was there any of that prior to you diving into this practice over the last couple of years?
Things passing me by.
Mm-hmm. Like not because you weren't practiced in the way of speaking via Toastmasters.
Yeah, like you said, and to go a little step back, like the introvert, typical sitting in front of a computer. I think when you're at that level, you don't really know what you're missing. So I couldn't tell you, right? Like, I'm sure there were a lot of opportunities that I had that I could have taken advantage of, but you just don't really know. And then you start to come to a level where you realize that there's more out there. And that's what happened. In terms of the business, there was basically a decade of heads down, like just making it go. And when you start coming up for air after that, then you realize, okay, I can't just be doing that for the next, rest of my life. What else is there? And you realize that to grow and improve, excel, you have to be interacting with other people and motivating other people and communicating with other people. And that's when you start trying to build that skill set. And that's something where I tried to build it too fast initially. That's, I was like, okay, I know I don't, I had a big, maybe we can get into this later. I had a big incident with the a system failure where it went down for multiple days, and it was all on me to put that back. But after that, I didn't know how much that impacted me, but in the year following, I was like, okay, I need to get here very quickly. And that did not work. It kind of threw me into a little bit of a dark place, actually. I had to come back to slow incremental work.
What was all this? What was the 10 pounds of shit you were trying to stuff in a 5-pound bag?
Just thinking, and the problem is I have my wife is very outgoing, very sociable. It just happens naturally for her. So I have a close model of what it could look like. And then to see that and then be in a situation where I can, not make that, like, she was able to go up to any person in any situation and make them feel very comfortable, bring out, they'll all of a sudden, like 5 minutes later, be talking like old friends and sharing their dark secrets. And to see that skill set and that level of capability and then be like, okay, how do I get there? And it's very apparent, there's a lot of things and just a lot of reps. And that's what you have to become comfortable with. Is it's going to take a while. And for somebody like me, that might not be my maximum encoding skill set. Like, I might probably never be quite as good as that as somebody that's done that all of their life. But you add that to the skill sets that you have, and now you have a combination that's really powerful.
Right. How does that dynamic serve you and your wife? Because for all the cigars that you and I have shared together, it sounds to me, my impression of your relationship is that you champion whatever personal growth looks like for either of you respectively, and you support each other in that initiative. So, for this thing that she does so naturally as an extrovert compared to your introverted nature, what does that mutual support of husband and wife look like? What's that dynamic for you guys?
There's two components of that. There's a lot of support and there's a lot of communication. We really do champion each other in whatever we put our mind to. She's gone through a lot of different phases of life, and I've been there for her. I've gone through a lot of phases of life, particularly when I was heads down in the business and not maybe with the family as much as I should have been, where she was there for me. But in this particular case, challenging for somebody who is a natural to explain or teach how to do it. If that makes sense, right? Like, just be yourself only goes so.
So how do you get beyond that? How do you bring down those walls of what I like to call it's really just comfortable language, because it's just so much part of the zeitgeist. Be authentic, be yourself. But like, what does that actually mean with regards to effective communication, right? So what is the growth that you and your wife have been through together to actually actively support each other, as opposed to just the attaboy and be yourself?
Well, that's a journey that I've kind of gone on. I don't know I think communication sort of falls out of the other thing, right? Like, be yourself goes to know yourself. And what does that actually mean, right? Like, and that sequence of events where I went through a dark place and then kind of started digging back out of it was a sequence of maybe wanting to be something else, wanting to find something else, learn a bunch of different things. And from the viewpoint of, I didn't have the tools that I needed. And then I got to the point, and this was only recently, this was only maybe a year ago, I got to the point where I came full circle on that and realized I really did have everything. I was, realized who I was, and I was kind of happy with that. And I had all the tools that I needed. And yeah, I needed to, add some skills here or there. But having that confidence that I was comfortable with who I was, that's what led to the next step. And, she supported me through that whole process. But that's what led to the next step of being able to go and incrementally improve instead of trying to make leaps. And then, it's something you see in the gym too, right? Like you work out too hard, you're like, want to get there in a minute, and you hurt something, or you just have a bad experience where, it's not fun to always be going to 100%. It's better to actually have something you'll do consistently.
Yeah.
So when you take that back and apply it to life, it's the same kind of a thing. And then you start getting your effective communication, and you start interacting with other people. And I was fortunate to have a couple of other people come into my life. One of them, Matt Landau, I did some coaching with him, and he took the time to basically say the same thing over and over and over again, different ways, until it sunk in. And it was in terms of communicating with people through energy and stories and feelings, instead of, as you might imagine with my computer background, I'm used to facts and knowledge, right? Which is good, but it doesn't have, it's flat, right? It doesn't register in the same way. It doesn't make you remember the way that a story will be. You kind of need both to be an effective communicator.
Yeah. And dude, watching you evolve in your communication style over the last couple of years has been really cool. And I'm curious, because of everything that you just mentioned, how challenging was it for you to break away from what was normal and comfortable, whether it was working for you or not, and become more expressive, communicative, and dare I say, even more authentic in the way that you communicate?
It was, for a guy like me, the challenge is kind of turning your brain off a little bit. That's the problem, when that's what you instinctively do, is think, and you're analyzing, and you're going to the next step, and then you're thinking 10 steps past that, and you're not now in the moment. That's really hard to turn off. And it's almost, you can't do it on purpose, right? You can't tell yourself, go turn it off. There's no pink elephant or whatever, right? Like you just can't do that. So you have to, that's where it comes back to reps. And I think other activities, like around that same time, I got into mountain biking with Will. And that's another, that because that forces you to not be thinking. If you're thinking about something else on the trail, you probably are going to crash. You know, it's a moment to moment thing where you're thinking, well, you're reacting, you know, you're in the flow, you're just moving your body and doing that for a couple hours on end. So then you apply those same skills when you're up speaking and you get to the point. The first few times you're thinking about everything that doesn't make sense. You're thinking about, you know, are my hands on the lectern? You know, why is my heart beating so much? And then you're able to have small thoughts, you know, of looking at this person in this way or projecting your voice or something like that. Just little nudges, but you're really now it's kind of a poetic dance. You're up there, you're giving the story, you're going through something and telling your story instead of reading off a memorized speech. That's when it starts to come alive, when you can have your waypoints and just kind of flow between them, not because you memorized everything or know the material so well in a factual way, but because and maybe this is the authentic part of it, because you're coming out of yourself, you're bringing your stories to others and using those to communicate your point or your message.
Yeah. You know what's helped me a lot in speaking, even in the small room that is Park Central, is, and you're one of these people for me when I speak. You know, I try to find at least one, what I like to call audience champion around the room, so that because nothing we say, not even this podcast, this conversation is for everybody, right? And the benefit that you and I have right here, right now, is being present with one another. But in the room, there's that dynamic is magnified the bigger the audience gets. And just having those people that are giving you that energy back in like that head nod or that subtle laugh at your joke, or like that eye contact, like, oh, I get it, I know where you're going.
Right.
And what's really helped me, because the biggest thing I've done was speaking to the city of Tempe, a couple thousand people, and having those audience champions sprinkled throughout the floor is massive, because it's just like, okay, if I just never mind the couple thousand people or the 10 people in this room, if I just connect with these 2, 3, 4 people, all of a sudden your body language, your scanning, your connection, like all of that starts to kind of fall into place. And for me, I used to come out in 5th gear and do a 5-minute speech in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think that's the natural inclination. Energy is high, nervousness is high, and you just go.
Yeah. So having those smaller, subtle connections sprinkled throughout the audience has been a real help for me in just down regulating and coming into my pace from the jump. What are some of the instruments or mechanisms that you leverage or that you play with in this practice as you become a better communicator?
Well, that's going to be an interesting one. Now that you say that particular identifying the people, I'm going to have to do that a little bit more. Because I really, you're not forced to do that at Park Central, which didn't really make me think about that. I think we've talked about that in the past, but now that you mention it in the context of being more capable in larger groups, it makes complete sense. Because if you're talking 10 or 20 people, you can kind of get away with talking to everybody or nobody. But when you get larger, right, you need to have that skill and learn to work the room, which is this is really interesting also, because maybe from my upbringing, maybe from my logical, right? Like I felt like it was somewhat inauthentic to work the room, right? Like to learn those skills, because there's a fine line between manipulation and just skillfully communicating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to get to the other side of this where I see and value the energy and the contribution that you're making to other people and see it as a skill to be learned and improved, not something to be, not something that's abusive or taking from people, but something that where you're giving and sharing. Because a lot of the examples that you get are, politicians doing their politician thing, or, these actors or whatever, just saying stuff that doesn't really mean anything. So it's been very interesting to go through this journey and start to learn and value and see some of our older members who have been doing it for 50, 60 years, and what they can still contribute and learning from them.
Dude, it was wild walking in there, because I got to tell you, I was pretty judgmental walking in that room for the first time. I had two thoughts. First, I was like, holy shit, I'm by leaps and bounds the youngest person in the room. And how polished that group is, I was like, I don't know if it's even possible for me to catch up. And that imposter syndrome was so real. And over the course of the last, I think I'm coming up on 3 years now. Over the course, it has become more and more, I appreciate their experience and wisdom so much more, and it's been a really impressive group to be a part of. And I don't know that it would be as impactful if it was a room of our peers.
Yeah. Yeah. You see somebody you expect to be polished and they're polished, and it's not quite the same impact. And it gives you, but the interesting thing for me, I guess, two things. Just the energy and vitality that a lot of these folks have at an age where you would not think maybe they would, and a lot of people don't. Like, this is something that they're excited about, and it's something that has kept them very sharp throughout those decades. And then it's also interesting to see after, you probably have this still as well. After a year, I noticed stuff that they're doing that I had no idea right at the beginning, right? There's layers. You start to see like more and more advanced techniques and stuff that you had no idea at the beginning.
Well, to your point about levels, I think where that really comes to fruition is you're on your own journey and you see what's possible. And then at the same time, as we gain new people, we get to see them start. And being able to provide criticism both up and downstream of your current position. I don't know that we champion that dynamic as much as we should.
Yeah. That's one of the geniuses of the way that it's set up. Everybody gets to have a chance in all of the seats. And everybody eventually gets to evaluate. So you're doing both sides of it and trying to give a good evaluation. But it's also just very cool to see somebody come in the door and start from, it brings me back to my clinging to my notes, right? Like reading every word and thinking that is a really great speech. And at that level, that is a phenomenal output from that. But then you see, the standard, right? Like you come in front of the lectern, that's a big one. You switch to the note cards, you start reading off bullet points, right? And you see the trend, like almost everybody follows as they get a little bit more familiar and a little bit more comfortable and just get the reps in.
I don't know how much I know you're leading a pretty decent sized team now these days, and you're communicating quite a bit with them. It's easy to take it for granted until you leverage the skill set somewhere else. because once you have a glimpse and an appreciation for what good looks like and what great can be, and then you and I seem to have this in common, that we're our own worst critic. And I'll go deliver somewhere else and be like, in the immediate aftermath, and I've been working on this with Melanie, my coach, just like, fuck, I could have done this better. And I start picking it apart like immediately. And then all of a sudden somebody comes up out of the crowd after the Q&A or whatever. They're like, that was so incredible. Thank you so much. This landed for me, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to take this away and move this forward or whatever. It's just like, oh, and I haven't stopped the criticism. However, I delay it to actually get some feedback as to the genuine impact of whatever I just delivered. And that has been tremendously helpful just for my own mind state and my willingness to get up in front of an audience and deliver. What does that look like for you in your team, at these offsites, as you communicate as a leader, even in your relationship with your wife? How have you leveraged that experience in these other arenas and expressed that practice?
It's something where you learn to, I think that's where telling stories has really changed the way that I communicate. That's been the big thing for me, because I always used to wonder, like, how could people spend so much time talking about nothing and just, it was like, if you come from the logical point of view, like, that's what it basically is, right? Mm-hmm. And you realize it's you're transferring the vibe in a lot of those cases. You're coming together, you're generating community with each other, you're sharing emotions, you're sharing, even when you're sharing what happened this weekend or whatever, stuff like that. And so it's important to come together and, in the team sense, to build community intentionally. Especially, we're a completely remote company. So we have 50 employees all around the world, completely remote, and we only get to see each other once a year we've started doing like retreats and offsites. But not only throughout, so it's important throughout the year, because you're all talking on Zoom, to figure out how you can make that a fun experience and how you can do just a little bit. We'll set up weekly, like, different water cooler, we call them small group meetings, where we get, a handful of people together to share and learn icebreaker type questions and just discuss for half an hour. And then coming together and thinking intentionally about how we want to have people together, what activities they want to do at the yearly retreat, so that they're there. There's some level of team involvement. There's some level of cross-team involvement intentionally. There's a lot of times we'll have some exercises, some work things to go through, but also thinking about how you want to structure the rest of the time so people are able to have those organic communications and conversations and build up that energy so that they feel like they're all on the same team for the next year coming forward.
No small feat, brother.
It's been a challenge, especially because the first time we wanted to do this was 2020, and you can imagine how that must have gone down.
But you guys were already remote, right?
Yes, we were completely remote. Okay. Yeah, that was the point at which we were growing large enough that we're like, okay, maybe we should do something at this point. Mm-hmm. But it was only, I think, 23 when we actually got to get everybody together for the first time, and we made a yearly tradition. And yeah, it's been amazing.
Sick. So, father to father, how have you managed the growth of your company and being the most present father and husband possible?
Better now, I guess this is the answer to that. At the beginning, we have 3 kids that are very close together. We had 3 kids under 3. Yeah. And my wife, Devin, she was doing most of that work. I was there. Like, that's the nice thing about working from home. Like, you're never you're not gone traveling, but you may not be present. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the case for a lot of that first probably decade that we were together, first 5 or 6 years that the kids were together. And it was hard for both of us. And about at that same time when I had my realization that things need to become different, she also had that same thought about how much I was there and involved. And we had a lot of conversations about how we could shift that balance a little bit. I still work a lot, but I also am aware and intentionally make space for the kids and take time to do a lot of activities with them. I'll do, like, each kid, I have something that I'll do with them throughout the week. My middle kid is really into soccer, so that's a lot of taking her to practice and spending time there.
Mm-hmm.
And just basically, it's almost like it's not quite the default parent, but I became like very happy when the kids would come to me pretty frequently. I mean, I still go to her for a lot of things. Like, there's some things you just want your mom for, but for me, like, they'll come to me a lot to answer questions, solve problems. I became involved in their school and did some PTA work and all of this thing just to tilt that balance back the other way a little bit, and also encourage and support Devin as she engaged in different business activities, and some on her own, some together, and let her take that step out of the house a little bit and share our time, basically.
What was that conversation like? Because that categorically speaking, in the work that I do, would be considered a courageous conversation. And a lot of times it tends to be a really simple one. And yet there's a lot of projection and uncertainty as to how, in this case, Devin is going to respond to, or for her, Chris is going to respond to this feeling of, we need to upgrade this thing. Changes need to be made. The thing that was working before that we agreed to once upon a time no longer serves me or us in this relationship. So what's the work that you guys have done as a unit to make those courageous conversations, to encourage them?
We're very different people, her and I. I think that contributes to our success. And the big commonality that we have is that we both are willing to come back to the table and keep talking, even if we might be frustrated and go our separate ways for a moment. We don't give each other the silent treatment. We don't hold grudges, and we'll come back and talk about it again and again and again and again until we come up with something that we can both work towards. And that's something where the conversation in particular was a lot of her saying, I feel alone in the marriage, and me saying, well, this is what we chose. You were going to do the kids. I was going to do the business. Isn't this what we signed up for? And I think it probably took a couple months of those conversations before I realized that, yes, probably this is, we did both sign up for that, but that's, like you said, like, this no longer serves us and we need to make a change. And that's when we started leaning into that transformation, and making sure that we both had our time and split it up a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that, because you didn't change the agreement per se, but you upgraded the arrangement, right? Yes, we agreed to that, and maybe potentially we're still on board for that. But it can't look like this anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can't look like this. And, one of the things that we did for a while, and we'll go through different phases of things, but make an agreement where she has her day of the week and I have mine. That's really made stuff a lot easier to communicate about, and right now we're doing like she'll get Saturday and I'll get Sunday or something like that. And I'll go mountain biking and, and she'll take care of the kids and I don't really have to worry about it. And I'll do the same thing for her while she's going out, and just having that separation where that's her day of the week and she can be confident that she has that space to do whatever she wants. And I have things at home handled and she doesn't have to worry about it. Those kinds of arrangements is what helped us move forward through that.
And, because it's so much a part of how you engage now, it sounds so simple. And yet it can be the most terrifying roadblock in a relationship. How have you guys made it okay for that, regardless of what I think how I think you're going to react, just giving each other the space, the freedom, and the safe space within your relationship to just say the quiet thing out loud?
That's been a progression as well. I think that maybe she would say the thing and I would hold it in a lot of times. We've gotten to a place where, it comes back to like, we'll say, you learn sometimes keeping the peace, kind of saying the quiet lie is not the way to do it. And both of us are very kind of introspective. Again, we don't hold grudges, and we come back to like, there's been times where both of us have been, thank you for saying that. I didn't really want to hear it. I was very mad at it, but I'm also glad that you were honest about that. And now we can move forward, and you have to have that level of honesty as a basis for your relationship, and know that when you have that, then you can take a lot more things, because you know that it's coming from that level of, this is information that might have been hard to share, but you can evaluate it from that perspective as well. This was information that was hard to share, and it's controversial. It might not want to hear it, but I can also process through it, knowing that, and being able to know that this person is in my corner, and this is bad news, or this is how they're feeling, and that's another thing that we both have progressed through, is learning the difference between this is how you're feeling and this is the way things are. And that's a very large Mars versus Venus, man versus woman processing thing that you start learning as a couple. Because again, very factually thinking me would maybe not think this is true, but the feeling behind it is very true. And those things can coexist at the same time. And you have to learn how to communicate together and realize that, no, you're not going to logically try to disprove this feeling. Like it's a real feeling. You're having the feeling. You can't logic your way out of it. You have to accept that and discuss why you're having that feeling. And, maybe it can be solved. Maybe it's not something that can be solved. It just needs to be heard.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I've never heard, I think that's beautiful. And I hope that at some point you do a speech on it in Toastmasters, but right now, give me an example of a quiet lie.
A quiet lie. You look good in those jeans. There are, there's all of these things that you can say to make your life a little bit smoother.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Sometimes it's good to say those, but a lot of times, you want to know if you're got something in your teeth, or, something out, it's in a relationship. There's things that are way more important than that. Like one of the things very early on, we had a discussion about was bragging about the amount of money that you have. And so that was one of the things that, we had a discussion about it and decided that we weren't going to do that, and that was important to me to just have that and say, this is not, it might sound good, but this is not really couth. Let's not do that and go forward. And, to this, you still every once in a while, but there's certain people, that's all they talk about. And it's just very frustrating.
Right. Dude, that's so interesting because it's counterintuitive, but if you put that into practice beyond the safety and comfort and longevity of your relationship with Devin, and with tact, you move away from the quiet lie. The counterintuitive benefit of that practice is trust. Like,
yeah.
oh shit. Like I compared to Nicole, I barely know you. But I trust you so much more because you told me I got some shit in my teeth. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like if he's gonna tell me the truth about that, how much more could I trust you with? And I don't think people understand the power in that small gesture.
Yeah. I mean, it's the small things are big, and it takes a while to kind of appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's such a massive upgrade that I hope everybody takes from this conversation is getting away from the quiet lies. It's Nicole's into fashion. I'm into function.
Yeah.
And when she asks me about things, if I don't get it, I just tell her I don't get it. As opposed to being obtuse about it and saying those don't look good on your face. Like she tried on these glasses one time, and they were neither here nor there for me. And I just told her, and this is like one of those things that we get to play with in our relationship now that probably would have been taken the wrong way once upon a time. Like, that's not going to stop. I told her, I was like, that's not going to stop me from going out in public with you.
Well, I mean, that's really important. Like, you're using that same thing in a tactful way. And that's the hard part, is being able to communicate that in a tactful way. And that's a really good example of, like, does this look good on me? And it's another thing that I've learned in terms of, but I think it applies both to business relationships and marital relationships. But a lot of times, have an opinion on things. If she says, does this outfit look good or that outfit look good? You don't necessarily have to stack rank them, right? You don't have to like break everything down. She just wants an honest, like, let's go with this one. And then to feel good about wearing the one that her person said, hey, let's do this one. Right. So having that, it's not always a minefield that you're about to step on. Right. You can go out and say, let's be a little assertive here and choose an option and let's go with this one. Like this.
Yeah. And that permission goes both ways, because the dark side of that functionality for me is, dude, I cannot pattern match to save my fucking life. And I'll come out of the room ready to go do this thing. And she's like, you can't wear those shoes with that.
Yep.
You need to change your shirt. And it's like, what the, like, I looked in the mirror. I felt good about this thing.
Yeah.
She's like,
yeah.
And the inverse of that narrative for us, she's like, Michael, it's my mission as your wife to make sure you never leave this house looking like a moron. Go change.
And you appreciate every second of that. I mean,
absolutely.
That's what makes the dream work.
But I think that's also an important distinction. Like, I don't like what she just told me, but I appreciate it so much. And I think that we we oftentimes naively want both those things at the same time. And oftentimes the best of it, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather know. I would rather have that. I'd rather know and be able to fix it in private. So,
Yeah.
but that's having that courage to step up and say that is
Mhm.
important in a lot of different cases. And I think that's something that's been coming to me in terms of working in business as well.
Mhm.
It circles around to that because you have the same things and you have to give actionable advice to people. And they
Mhm.
come to you and you can't just say, no, that sucks. Do it again.
Mhm.
You have to tell them why it's not as good as it could be and what you want them to focus on next time. You have to use these same skills in all sets of your life.
Right. Right. Yeah, it doesn't do you any good to isolate the utility of this behavior because it works and has so many benefits across the board as opposed to like this isolated context and it only works here. Because whether it's your marriage, your kids, or your business, there are opportunities to both lead and follow, but more importantly, provide feedback, actionable feedback all the time. So rather than trying to do this mental gymnastics of, oh, I'm going to do it like this over here with the kids and like this with Devin and like this at work with my business partners. No, that dude, the energetic toll is so understated of that practice as opposed to the consolidation and the almost universal application of the behavior. Like, what is the highest utility behavior that I can move through all three of these states of being so that I can come home in one piece and be present at peace? And I don't think people do that work to really understand the efficiency of their energy.
Yeah, efficiency, that's an interesting topic too. I think I mean, you must have a lot of different experiences with that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see like efficiency as a good thing or also can be pursued too much?
Well, I think if my algorithm is telling me any kind of truth, I think there's a very real use case for the over index in AI and then the rehiring of human beings in a lot of these companies as of late. That's one where it's like they sh- tried to streamline too much. It sounds like, and I don't speak tech. I might be out of school on this one. This is way more your lane than it is mine. But that I feel like that's a very real example in the zeitgeist right now of trying to remove the complexity of being human for the efficiency of technology and it backfiring. Uh, and at the same time, there is benefit to a little bit of friction because it's what's required to keep the system robust. Speaking about something I know deeply, that is most easily applied to training, right? You've got to stress the system to receive any kind of gain. And if that isn't happening, the system gets weaker. It's less robust. It's less adaptable, right? And there's a happy medium between moving better or systemizing operations to smooth things out. And at the same time, if you expect any kind of growth, there needs to be some kind of friction introduced to the system. You can't swing the pendulum all the way to one end of the spectrum or the other because it all falls apart in the extremes.
Yeah, that's a good, I mean, if you get to the end of the pendulum, you're either not getting a training effect or you're way overdoing it, or you're really just, you can pursue efficiency too much and then make the system very brittle. That's something that I've noticed. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of these AI companies that, or not really AI companies, but companies that come in and try and replace a lot of people with AI. And then they take some of the human slack out of the system. And it sounds really good for a minute, but then something happens where it's not quite what's in the rule book and the system doesn't know how to deal with it. And you also have cases where just the human energy papers over and smooths over a lot of things. A lot of the interactions that you would have. If AI is exactly perfect, that's great. But if AI is not perfect, it's extremely frustrating not to have that human energy lubricating it a little bit.
Oh, I love that. Human lubricant. That sounds really disgusting and really awesome at the same time. As far as business is concerned, it's required, dude. And there's this idea that if we become hyper efficient, we'll be able to hockey stick sooner and achieve what Chris Williamson refers to as escape velocity, right? And at the same time, going back to the reps required in small rooms that prepare you for the big stage, like if you get hyper efficient too fast, it's really easy, or without that requisite friction as built into the system, that engine will overheat really fucking quick, and for perfect example, a buddy of mine, Adam von Rothfelder, owns Strong Coffee Company. Okay. And 3 or 4 years ago, an influencer, knees over toes guy. Do you know him?
Okay.
Yeah. He's on Rogan. Okay. And they get on this tangent about morning routines and stuff. And it's, I believe, 37 seconds of a 3-hour conversation. Okay. Where knees over toes guy mentions how he uses strong coffee specifically in his morning routine, and the audience capture of that 37-second soundbite, the strong coffee order system couldn't handle the influx of business, right? And he had to weather that storm for however long until back orders got on track and all that other kind of good stuff. And it's like, did he know that he needed to be prepared for that? No, that's like a black swan of the best kind, and at the same time, like the fact that he wasn't efficient enough, he was able to manage that friction.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't just on autopilot and then everything crashed and burned. You could get in there and work with things and then put them.
Yeah. So I think it's more so it's less about becoming hyper efficient and more so being able to handle incremental friction. That's I guess the definition of the human lubricant in the tech space. We still have to maintain the ability to manage that friction while becoming more efficient.
That's a lesson I think we just keep forgetting and learning over and over again. That was one of the big things we found out in COVID, how interconnected the supply chains had become, and for efficiency's sake, basically, and how just in time they had become also with no stock anywhere. And then you don't have that delivery that day and everything grinds to a halt, all in the name of efficiency.
Yep. I love that we got here, man, because this has so much application in so many other areas. You know, uh, just going back to how you interact with Devin and your the stakeholders in your business, it's creating a culture that in your relationships, personal or professional or otherwise, in which that friction is expected, right? This isn't an inconvenience. It's actually a feature of the experience, right? We don't tell quiet lies. You know, this friction, these courageous conversations actually make us more agile and more adaptable, more robust as a unit and as individuals.
Yeah, I think intentionally creating your culture and your values is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how much work it takes is something that having kids has really made me understand. Because with kids, you have to tell them 50 times before it even starts to sink in.
Mm-hmm.
And tell them a concept, this or that concept. And I realized adults are actually not that much different. You go to an adult and you tell them one time and you expect them to always do that thing. Well, you better have given them a really good reason, a really great why. And even then, it probably isn't going to sink in. You have to repeat over and over again. You have to communicate the why, tell the stories, and have values. And you really don't know, like, it's really not sunk in until you hear people repeating it to themselves as a reason to do something. This is something we've seen in our business. One thing that we did a few years ago was sit down and create and name some of our values. And one of them is create happiness. And that's something that we look for in our overall the company, but especially in our support team. Also, sometimes when other teams are helping out support. And that's something that they've come to now repeat and sometimes throw back in our faces as the owners, like, hey, don't we want to create happiness with this person? And then it makes me realize, yes, actually, it's going to be a lot of work. Maybe it's going to be expensive, but we do want to go there and create that happiness. And that's when you know that it's actually sunk in, when you have a situation like that.
What are some of the other values? Create happiness.
Manager of one is another that we have, which we stole from, I think, 37 Signals, another tech company. But that means everybody should be, in some sense, their own manager. They should go out and search out what they should do. They should figure out what's the next step. They should not just wait for somebody to hand them another task. They should look at the process and look at their job and see maybe it should be expanded, maybe something can be done a little bit better, and then just go do that in a lot of cases instead of having to ask for confirmation every time. So, yeah, there's that. There's persistence is another one that we have as well. And that's more of just continuing we see some people, and when you start at the company, you'll find out our software is very large and there's a lot of different options in it. And it takes time to get up to speed on all of that and then drill in and just solve a problem. And sometimes problems can take a while to solve as well. And so we value that persistence that people have when they go and do things step by step by step.
Dude, Chris, I'm grateful for you, man. You're a man of principle. I'm honored to have you in my circle. It's been a pleasure to see how you've evolved as a communicator, not just a speaker, through Toastmasters. And it's great that we get to jam at Churchill's every so often and catch up and grow together, man, in this experience. Where can the audience find you, OwnerRez, et cetera, and see what you're building and working on, man?
If you go to ownerrez.com, you can find out more about our vacation rental platform. It's an automation platform for owners and property managers that centralizes all aspects of your business. It will push your listings to Vrbo and Airbnb. It will manage all the bookings and lets you configure everything from one central spot instead of going everywhere around and having to risk double bookings and stuff like that. So you can find us at ownerrez.com. Paul, my co-founder, and I also have a podcast, the Walk and Talk podcast, which you can find on Spotify.
Hell yeah. Love it, man. Everybody go out there, see what OwnerRez is all about, and link up with Chris. If you're on a mission to be the fittest leader possible, it comes down to integrity, courage, and ownership. And if you want to find out how you show up as a leader, take the quiz at nextlevelhq.co. And until next time, it all comes down to alignment first.